All right. Well, welcome everyone. And good afternoon. At least it is afternoon here in Colorado. Welcome to today's CSL in session, Strategies for Success for Neurodiverse Librarians. My name is Christine Krieger, and I am the Professional Development Consultant for the Colorado State Library. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with CSL in session, we really try to provide a format and a framework where we can learn from each other as well as learning from the presenter. So the main way that you'll have the opportunity to participate today is via the chat. We've got lots and lots of chances for you to share your experiences, your thoughts, and your ideas on today's topic. But there also may be time at the end to unmute and ask questions or to share ideas as well. So we are going to ask that you remain muted as we go through the session, but do feel free to use the chat for questions. And as I said before, to share your thoughts and ideas as we go along. You're also welcome to have your camera on or off as you see fit. We are recording this session and the archive will be available hopefully by tomorrow on the Libraries Learn website. And I will also email a link to the archive to everybody who registered. I believe we have Zoom automatic captions available for this session, but Inas was also good enough to turn on the PowerPoint captions for today's session. So if you need those, they're available for you. And I think with that, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our presenter for today, Inas Salah, who is a neurodiverse librarian that works for the Denver Public Library. She earned her MLIS from the University of Denver and has a BA in political science from Metro State University. And she has a deep love for learning and enjoys spending time in nature. So Inas, I think I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you so much for the pleasant and lovely intro. So it's nice to be here. Thank you, everybody, for making it to the webinar this afternoon. So as Christine said, I am a neurodiverse librarian. I work with Denver Public Library, and I got my degree in 2023. I started working on call. And I had a lot of struggles when I first started working as an on-call, even as an on-call librarian. I felt that as library staff, we absolutely, accommodate our patrons, which is so necessary. We need to do that, but we don't think about our staff, and so many of our staff need modifications and extra help and extra awareness about neurodiversity and helping staff to achieve their goals, to make a work environment that's easy and nice, and everybody can just get along. So this is my first webinar, so bear with me when I make mistakes. There will be a lot. I don't know if there will be a lot or not, but so here I go. So strategies for success for neurodiverse librarians. And I gave you a little bit of why I thought of this topic. So if anybody is interested, you could put in the chat, what does it mean to be neurodiverse? Can anyone answer that question?
Give people just a moment or two to type into chat.
Sure. So what does it mean? What does neurodiverse mean? Does it mean different way of thinking, different way of handling emotions?
So one participant says it often means that I am out of step with many of my coworkers. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, get that too. Yeah, absolutely. It could mean many different things. And that's something that I experienced too, is something that I felt, really, like you said, out of step. I didn't feel like I belonged. I didn't feel like people got me. I didn't feel like, I thought people were judging me. And that's the reality of it. That's how I felt. And I found out it was actually true. So unfortunately,
Yeah, we have a couple other people
Mhm.
saying that thinking in a unique way. Neurodiverse means that there is a diverse range of neurotypes. Neurodivergent means that your type isn't maybe typical. Brains are very diverse, seen as different from the societal norm. Yeah, that's kind of important. Different way of perceiving the world and our place in it. receiving and giving in different ways, whether that's information or emotions, thinking different, what is easy, what is hard, what is hard is easy. Okay, yep, that makes sense. Various ways of thinking, processing, and communicating. I think that I got everybody's, but yeah, thank you guys for sharing this. There we go. And my favorite, running advanced software on regular hardware. That's awesome.
Very cool. Yes. So all of that, yes, absolutely, all of that. So I, wanted to get a survey of that, but so I came up with a scenario. And it is, if anybody wants to answer this, please feel free. You are working on the reference desk when you overhear an angry patron yelling at your colleague and for asking the same question twice. You see your colleague freeze and unsure how to address the patron. You are not aware that your colleague is neurodiverse. Number one, what might you think about your colleague? And number two, how would you feel in the situation?
Once again, we'll give you a
Hmm.
minute to think about that and add your thoughts into chat.
Yeah, I know sometimes I would feel annoyed, or I've had other people feel annoyed about me about not being able to handle situations like this.
Although I don't know if any of us handle angry patrons very well, very well. So
Do it.
somebody said that they would want to check that they are okay and have someone else take over.
Mhm.
Um, Thinking, do they need assistance and how would you feel? Probably feel sick. Thinking that my colleague might need and want support, be worried for my colleague, that they might be feeling unsafe, and sympathy as well as panic. Yeah, like I don't think any of us like angry patrons. Um, uh, I would be concerned for my colleagues' well-being. I would think that they are overwhelmed or embarrassed, and I would feel empathetic, and I would offer assistance and support, tag out with the colleague, and understandable, as I often need things repeated. And then if the patron is actively yelling, I would step in and see if I could help in any way.
Well, you guys are all really great colleagues. I would love to have you as a colleague. All of that, yes, I would. I'm the same way. I would do the same for my colleagues, and I would hope that my colleagues would do the same for me. In my experience, I've had colleagues not feeling like I was qualified enough to have the position because of situations like this, and that's my experience. But as a librarian, we are a lot of us are in the library world to help and make a difference for other people, in other people's lives, and so this is something that is it could be interpreted in many ways. So yes, absolutely, all of that. And let's see here. So now, how many of you are familiar in some way with neurodiverse librarianship? Either you or somebody that is neurodiverse, your colleague, your friend, child.
So we're getting some yeses, living it myself. A lot of people saying yes,
Mhm.
living and breathing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yep. So I, again, me too. I am neurodiverse, and so I really relate to a lot of this. So I'm glad that we found a community that can relate to each other in this way. So I'm sure many of you know Judy Singer, who is one of the pioneers of the movements of the neurodiversity movement. She's a social scientist, and along with Robert Chapman, who is another pioneer in the neurodiversity movement. So, just a little background information. The neurodiversity movement is a social justice movement based on the philosophy that different ways of thinking and behaving should be embraced and are the natural variations of being human. Everyone has a unique way of learning, processing, and applying information, and that's so very true. Everyone does. We no two brains are identical, no two experiences are identical. Even my brother and my sister, I have a twin brother and older sister, and even those same parents and same upbringing, but completely different turnouts with all of us. So yes, absolutely. It is the social justice movement. And however, I wanted to address that according to the American Psychiatric Association, the symptoms of neurodiversity interfere or reduce the quality of social, academic, or occupational functioning. So this brings us to the question, very famous question, is this a social model of disability or is it a medical model of disability? Is it a disability? And these are the questions, the background questions that a lot of people are asking. In my opinion, in my experience, I feel that it is an injoint of both of them. I couldn't do my daily functioning activities if I did not have the medical model. But if I didn't have the medical model, would I be accepted socially? So it's a really tricky thing. But I came to the conclusion that there's a middle ground. I think we need both. So, excuse me. Neurodiversity is a broad subject with many areas to consider. There's not just a one size fits all approach. And the needs for dyslexia and dementia are completely different conditions labeled under the same category. So I think that's a problem there. We can't label, first of all, we shouldn't label anything, but as far as both of these conditions, why are they labeled under the same category? They're completely different conditions. So I think more research should be done and more ways to categorize these conditions is very important too. And again, some people argue that we are all neurodiverse. And then again, is it neurodiverse or neurodivergent? And that's a big argument that is still happening now. Some people would classify neurodiverse as the umbrella, and then neurodivergent with more of a more serious condition that interferes with the quality of life. So many ongoing topics and discussions about this, and I would love to hear anybody else's opinions about any of this. So anybody have any thoughts or something they would like to say about this slide?
Dawn shared a link to a video, which I won't play right now, but I'll take a look at it and possibly link it to the Libraries Learn website as well. She said that it was shared with us during a training and she found it very helpful, so we can take a look at that. And we have people saying neurodiverse is similar to diversity in general. If it's a room full of autistic people, it isn't diverse. It's all the same, but it is neurodivergent. That's a good way of explaining it. And the book, We Are All Neurodiverse, is good at explaining. So that's another resource.
Right, absolutely. So absolutely, all of this is very true. Great. So another question. So what challenges have you observed from being neurodiverse or working with somebody who is neurodiverse or neurodivergent? I know with myself, I felt very frustrated. I felt like maybe I didn't fit in or I couldn't do the job the way it was needed, or my colleagues had a better not to compare, but like a better way of handling situations and thinking more quickly than I did or that I would. So I felt really frustrated and felt really out of place. Um, so those are some of the feelings that I had. I felt that people were questioning if I was qualified enough to to be a librarian, even though I had the background and I had very good grades. I had a 3.97 in grad school, which actually I never had in my schooling career. Schooling was really hard for me growing up. I remember, like I mentioned, my brother and my siblings, they would always get in the 90th percentile doing standardized testing, and I always scored 20% and below. And so I carried a lot of shame with that for many, many years. And so there's a lot that goes with this, So is there anything in the chat?
Yes, we have actually quite a bit in chat. And so I really appreciate everybody sharing their experiences. So expectations not matching ability, things that I say being misinterpreted as overly aggressive or overly detailed. Um, on the other end, patience is key and learning communication styles and needs. So we all communicate in different ways. Someone else also saying understanding communication styles and giving time for folks to process and not have to respond immediately, being misunderstood, focus issues, and lack of understanding from supervisors on how to properly lay out tasks and expectations and how to adapt to an employee's specific needs. Um, Another one for communication. Communication is a big challenge. Sometimes I don't notice things that I should, like patrons waiting for assistance, constantly advocating, explaining what tools I need to succeed, which is awesome. Keep doing that. But it can be exhausting and discouraging. Different folks need different structures in their workday and workload. More about communication. Communication seems to be a very sticky point. I think human beings in general are not great at communication, but it can seem like we're speaking different languages with other people. Um, my neurodivergent pokes at my husband's neurodivergence and sometimes can spark conflicts, being misunderstood and shut down for bringing up a concern that other people didn't feel was of value. Um, Times when tone, facial expressions are misinterpreted and can make communication hard with some people. And customer service oriented professions are not neurodiverse friendly systematically, despite how much we strive to support neurodiverse communities. Thank you for saying that. Um, Somebody mentioning that oftentimes they get to the end of the week and feel like they're out of energy because they've spent so much time during the first part of the week to try to focus and to do all of the other things. Um, and someone else is saying that I think one of the biggest challenges is when I'm not aware that someone else is neurodiverse, thus worrying that they're doing something wrong. So if they are processing different information at a different rate and not responding immediately, sometimes then we might take it upon ourselves, and we're not actually providing what is needed. Let's see. Um, Somebody was talking about when they work with teens, it was helpful for connecting and relating to neurodiverse teens in the library space. Works in maker spaces now and both thrive and struggle at the fast-paced, chaotic environment. Yeah, so it seems like there's a lot of, really specific challenges that tends to be specific to the individual. So I think that
Mhm.
speaks to what you were saying on the previous slide.
Right, right. And like you said, communication is a huge one, as well as misread like misinterpreting or allowing people to process what they've learned or what they're learning. That's a huge one too. For me, it is. So what does it look like in the workplace? So I want to first say that a lot of neurodiverse or neurodivergent people, it could be it could be invisible. So a lot of people wouldn't even know that I'm neurodiverse and neurodivergent, just by looking at me, because I'm always really put together really well. I speak really well. I've learned to mask my symptoms really well. And it's gotten me very far as like getting career opportunities and things like that. But as far as maintaining those opportunities, I had a really hard time with that. I remember in 2018, I lost 2 jobs within the same year. My daughter was really young, and that inspired me to get evaluated. I'm thinking there has to be something wrong with something, like as far as like, am I processing information correctly or what is going on? And so I got evaluated and I found out the things that I found out, and it was quite relieving to me. So what does it look like in the workplace? It may be invisible. It's difficulty, in my case, it's difficulty expressing opinions and troubleshooting. Tasks take longer to complete, extreme social anxiety, avoiding certain responsibilities, avoiding certain people, and extreme introversion. Can anybody relate to any of these? And then what other ones do they manifest in your workplace? What other qualities or other traits?
Yeah, so a lot of people are saying that they can definitely relate. Excuse me. Someone else pointed out that certain tasks can actually take less time because they can often be efficient if it's an interest or a passion. Um, extreme social anxiety and disliking when routine is thrown off, and definitely can relate to social anxiety. And I'm not familiar with RSD as initials, so somebody might have to explain that to me. But being overwhelmed by too many choices, um, rejection sensitive dysphoria,
All of it.
not getting feedback, right? Like we all need feedback to be able to do our jobs better. And so not getting feedback for how you're doing can oftentimes lead me to think that I'm doing a terrible job because of that anxiety. Um,
I relate to that 1,000,000%.
yeah.
Plus, my love language is verbal communication, so that doesn't help. But yes, I relate to that.
Yeah. So problem with over efficiency, finish everything too fast or too far in advance. Needing to stem, especially when overwhelmed by sensation or disruption, and that then being classed as a distraction. Feelings of failure, overcompensating, comparing yourself to coworkers, their accomplishments, and flourishing things that you're struggling with. Yeah, people are being very, very open and vulnerable in this conversation, and it's appreciated.
Absolutely. It is, we have to have discussions like this, to figure, to have, to develop sense of community. And in a lot of, in all cases, we should have discussions around a lot of this stuff. So there are challenges as we mentioned. Some of them, it can be forgetting important information, sensory overloading, difficulty reading social cues, not being able to express yourself clearly. Tasks take longer to complete in some cases, as somebody pointed out. Coworkers may ridicule you, extreme frustration, and difficulty hearing and processing information. Those are a lot of the challenges that I faced, and I've seen my friends face for being neurodivergent or neurodiverse. So, but on the bright side, there are strengths, and this is where this is the exciting part of the presentation for me. The strengths. So there's a quote that I really loved by Harvey Bloom, who's a journalist, and it says, "Neurodiversity may be the birthplace of some of humanity's greatest minds," and I find that to be so true because of neurodiversity, and in a lot of ways, and it can develop a strong work ethic. In my opinion, I felt I in some ways I overcompensated to build that work ethic, but I still I developed a strong work ethic because of my neurodiversity. Somebody said in the comments about too a lot of detail. A lot of people that are neurodiverse or divergent have a strong attention to detail, and that's a strength. That's something that I feel is a really strong strength. Resilience, we're resilient people. We can be, we um I contribute my resilience, and I've been through a lot of stuff, but I contribute to my grit to being neurodivergent. Every time I've had to fall, with whether it was school or work or anything, I had to build myself up, which just caused more resilience. And so, creativity. A lot of people can be so really creative if they, are neurodiverse or neurodivergent. Honest, a lot of people can be honest, tenacious, innovative, and determined. So these are a lot of the good strengths that neurodiversity are people with neurodiversity are blessed with or can be blessed with. So moving on, does anybody have anything to say about this slide or any other strengths that they've noticed?
There was a bit of a conversation around where a couple people were talking about being the strong work ethic and being efficient, which can often then lead to being tasked with too many tasks. Once again, if you're too good at what you're doing, then somebody will give you more, right? Because you're done with your work, and so that can lead to burnout and kind of having to take on too much. Earlier, when we were talking about challenges, somebody mentioned emotional dysregulation. And then someone else mentioned that attention to detail can really drive other people crazy. Once again, if everybody thinks and I find that there are some people that are kind of like go with the flow, and then there's people like me who are like, no, it says on here we have to do it this way. So
Mhm. Great. Yeah, all of that, yes. So so there are a lot of strengths, and the next slide is so with the strengths and the challenges that we just addressed in the work environment, what modifications do you think are needed in the work environment to ex to what is the word I'm looking for? See, for forgetfulness, that's one of mine. It's the executive functioning. Um, what modifications do you think are needed in the workplace?
Um, so we've got clear communication, especially when it comes to why. So explaining the why of why we have to do things.
Yeah.
Flexibility, fluorescent light covers.
Yeah.
A quiet place to get away from others and communication training, the ability to turn some lights off, written communication so that you don't forget, giving people time to process. Holy moly, we have people that are already like, we're going to like rework the workplace here. Um,
It's
we've
amazing.
got, let's see, I lost track where I was. Having trouble with open office layouts, but that's the only option at their workplace. Boundaries training. Yes. More about the lights. Normalize the use of fidgets in meetings. Yes, I think people get called out too much for fidgets, um, or fidget things. Let's see. Somebody made their own shield for the lights in the office. And just more of an understanding of neurodiversity in general amongst coworkers. And I think that was one of the things that we really wanted to kind of start the conversation. Well, not start the conversation. I'm sure it's happening in other places, but have the conversation about that so that we can all learn how we can work best together. Documentation of processes. Yeah, anything that can be written down and revisited later is great. Clear deadlines. Yes. These are
Well,
all great. And what I
that's
might do is after this session, the chat won't necessarily be part of the archive, but I might pull out some of these ideas and create just a separate document that we can post on Libraries Learn as well.
sounds like a great idea. So yes, all those modifications are wonderful, as Christine said. And so I a lot of have a lot of the strategies that I put on here have been already addressed. So but I will just go through them and see if it resonates with anybody. So some growth strategies, again, additional patience and training, boundaries training, as somebody said, additional training for many cases. Mentor pairing was helpful for me in a way that I felt I wasn't directly working with somebody on my team, but I was also getting that guidance and that throwing ideas off. Well, this happened in this, situation. So how do I deal with it? Knowing that I am neurodiverse. So I think that that was helpful for me. Spaces for limited work disruptions and work flexibility. I think that was addressed. In my case, I cannot work if the TV's on. Like my daughter loves to come home and put the TV on. I'm like, just turn it off. I'm trying to work. Or something, or she wants to talk, or there's some sound, or like my faucet is dripping. There's many things that can distract me. And many of us. So spaces for limited work disruptions and work flexibility and being able to work from home or a place that is quiet enough that you can get your task completed is really helpful for many people. Extra time to complete assignments that somebody said about the deadlines. And I think in ways that if it's helpful for some people to in my case, like I would like to know what I'm doing like a couple months ahead of time so I can prepare for it during that, knowing what to look forward to, or not look forward, but like look, going to what I'm gonna have to do. So, UDL approach, universal design learning approach, assistive technologies. I think this should be implemented more in the workplace. It's not just for our patrons, but for our staff. Zero bully tolerance rules enforced by management. I think this was a huge one. I feel like a lot of bullies when they're kids, they grow up to be big bullies, and management doesn't in a lot of cases management doesn't do anything about it. And I don't like that. I wish that there was some type of enforcement by management to nip this. Using a clear communication style. Yes, that's one that came up a lot. And having a supportive work environment is something that is also helpful to get work and accomplishments done. Is there anything in the chat, Christine? No. Anybody have anything else that they would like to include?
Sorry, I was chatting and I was muted. So yes, a lot of what you were saying is resonating with people. Understanding, like maybe even just having headphones, so sound noise canceling headphones, or where they can listen to their own audio, knowing what to expect. Like as soon as people know, let us know. Don't tell me 5 minutes before a meeting that I need to come thinking about something about for the meeting. Sooner rather than later. Let's see. So we've got a couple questions that I'll read out loud, and if we're going to get to them later, that's fine too. But one of the questions is, what do you do or what to do if you suspect someone is neurodiverse but has not self-identified? And I think we can open it up to people who are online as well.
Absolutely. In a couple slides after the next three, I have one slide that can help with that question. So we will address it in just a couple slides.
Okay. And then one other question is, are there any resources for when maybe the bully is also management? So maybe the person not understanding neurodiversity is also management.
There's some, I have a reference list and some acts later on in the PowerPoint too.
Perfect. All right. So it looks like we'll get to those two questions, but if by chance we don't answer them satisfactory at the end, you can let us know.
Sure. Okay, so yes, so techniques for work and daily successes. So I found that I would say like the next three slides are techniques for people that are neurodivergent or neurodiverse. And these techniques have helped me just have a better quality of life, having just knowing what I'm gonna do. And so anyway, so writing the most important things down with a pen and a piece of paper. I think this is the number one, the most important thing for me. So I remember what I've scheduled, what I'm gonna say, just practicing a lot of what if I'm going to a meeting, how am I going to respond? Many things, like just writing it down, and not even on, for me, I don't like the phone as much. I like a pen and a piece of paper. Some people prefer to use the phone, but I something about a pen and a piece of paper for me. Holding myself in love and trying not to self-stigmatize. This one, like we talked, I mentioned that for a lot of years, I carried a lot of shame with being neurodivergent. And there's growing, developing more, there shouldn't be. Asking for information and tasks to be repeated. I think somebody mentioned that earlier. One thing that helped me a lot, and if anybody is able to, if you're able to, having a therapist who understands disabilities and offers neurofeedback to optimize brain function. I know in Colorado, Medicaid does cover some neurofeedback, or there are some insurances that can cover neurofeedback, and that is fantastic way to optimize brain functioning. Follow the boom and bust technique. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with the boom and bust technique, but that's when you are when the boom technique is when you are most alert and most your creative juices are running in your brain, and you're able to get a lot of work done during that time. And then the bust technique is when you are feeling a little, sluggish and slower. So what I do in my life, in the boom technique for me, is from the hours of like 4:30 until 9. So I get a lot of my creative work done. I get a lot of my writing, my reading, and things like that done. And then after I pick my daughter up from school until later on that night, it's the bust. And so I do the mundane things like the folding laundry, or the cleaning, doing the dishes, or light reading, or things like that, if you're able to. That's helped me a lot, to be productive. Having structure throughout the day. I think somebody mentioned that, with throwing things off routine. Routine is so important, and it's been so important for me too. So having structure throughout the day, requesting modifications and advocating for yourself. I think that's a huge one. As being neurodivergent, if I didn't advocate for myself, no one would advocate for me. I had to advocate for myself to get the modifications that I needed. Breaking tasks down into smaller steps to avoid overloading. This has helped me, and I think this can help anybody, so they don't feel so overwhelmed. But this is some practical things that you can do. That's page 1. There's 3 pages of this. Number 2, practicing what I want to say before I say it. I had a lot of practice with this PowerPoint. I was really nervous, but I don't know if it's coming through or not, but I did practice a lot. And I had to practice what I wanted to say before I said it. Having minimal or no distractions when working on a project or an assignment. I think somebody mentioned with having like the noise canceling earphones. That's something that I should invest in. That's a great idea. Something that's helped me if I need to remember important or immediate information, like say I need to remember it 10 minutes later, and there's no pen and piece of paper. I try to create a rhyming song to remember that information. So it's like, it's just something catchy, something you could just like play around with, some poetry, I don't know, something that you can make, something that rhymes that you can recall that information. As humans, I feel like we are able to better process or better remember things that are more catchy and things like that. So that's one of my favorite ones. Learning in multi-modules techniques such as visual, auditorial, and hands-on. Everybody has different ways of learning and different processing speeds and styles. So I think if we're able to as management, if you're in management, if you're able to offer many techniques of learning, I think that's a great tool. Asking myself questions such as how and where to get a better understanding of what I'm learning and experiencing. Having strong routines, practicing CBT for techniques for anxiety and emotional regulation. I think in my case, I get so worked up over things I can't control. And I think CBT techniques like holding a piece of ice in my hand if I'm too emotionally stimulated, or deep breathing, or some techniques that can help regulate a little bit better so you're able to think more clear. Getting enough sleep, repetition when learning new skills. And I think repetition anytime, not just when learning new skills. I think repetition is is another crucial step to learning and retaining information. Setting time and alarm clocks for easy transitioning. I think this has helped me and my daughter a lot when I was in school. I'm like, okay, just 10 more minutes of this, assignment, and then I'm going to move on to something else. Or 10 more minutes of playtime and we'll move on to something else. 2 minutes, or just having some reminders and something along those lines. So that's page 2 and page 3. So visual and physical calendars. If you're a visual learner, if you're a visual person, I think a big visual calendar, if you have the space to put it on your wall or something like that, would be very helpful. Marrying concepts such as visual pictures and simple ideas to remembering and applying information. I think we talk a lot about learning and processing, but what about applying information? How do we apply this information that we've learned, and in what speeds and what ways? And what's the best technique to do this? Reflecting at the end of each day with positive affirmations. I think that one is just good for anybody. Joining support groups that help support people that are neurodiverse or neurodivergent, exercising daily, eating well balanced meals, having health insurance if possible, getting regular checkups from doctor's office if possible. Use your intuition, ask lots of questions, and pay attention to your body is a huge one. And that's what's helped me in a lot of ways. And do not cope with drugs or alcohol is another one. So anything in the chat?
Going kind of back a little bit. So we've got earlier it was mentioned that just having easier avenues to requesting accommodations and transparency on what accommodations are available in the workplace would be great. Um, Using organizing systems that work for each individual, so letting the person pick it instead of trying to force their brains to work with a pre-described system. Agreement on using alarms for everything, to get to meetings on time or to do other things. A lot of people saying, that they also can't live without pen and paper. They want to be able to write that stuff down or do bullet journaling. I may mispronounce this, but certain binaural sounds help with focus. More about setting a timer and then building in transition time. So I know a lot of, especially if you work a service desk, you're moving from one patron to the next, or sometimes changing desks. I was in the children's area, now I'm in reference, but having some transition time between tasks would be great. And someone said that I've actually started keeping a log of what I've done that tries to update at the end of the day. It's like journaling, but for work, and it helps you remember what you have done, divide out the tasks a little bit more. It helps them plan the days a little bit faster. And I would say, maybe adding on to that, like sometimes we can get to the end of the day and feel like we've absolutely done nothing. But if we do something like that, we actually have something to look back on, be like, yeah, no, this is why I'm tired at the end of today. Look at all the stuff I did. So yeah, lots of great ideas there.
Absolutely. I think with the sound, I don't know how to say it either, but that's like some I listen to ambient music. That's something that's helped me. Just some nice calming, focused music that just, distract takes away all the noise. And that's a great one. That's helped me a lot too. And I appreciate all these comments. So thank you for all of that. So I think a couple slides ago we talked about what to do if you see your colleague struggling, or how can you help? And so this is some steps to take if your colleague is struggling. So I think the first one is don't make assumptions about what's happening with them or their life or anything. Just don't make assumptions about that. Talk to them in private. Ask if they need help. Maintain confidentiality if personal information has been disclosed. Maintain respectful communication. Look into best practices and procedures for involving management if needed. Management it's kind of tricky. Celebrate successes and diversity. Avoid gossip. Share tips and helpful suggestions, and ask how you can support them. These are some things you can do to help to help your colleague if your colleague is struggling. I don't know if that answered the question that somebody had a couple of like 10 minutes ago, but I think somewhere along those lines. Is it anything else anybody else would like to have their input?
Allow them space and time to try many ways of doing things until they find what works for them. So being encouraging. Yeah, they don't have to disclose for you. Yeah, definitely. They don't have to disclose for you to support them and accommodate. Like I said, if we are kind and caring to our coworkers, it doesn't matter whether they're neurodivergent or not. If people are struggling, we can be empathetic, relate with the colleagues, sharing own struggles, whether or not they disclose anything.
Wonderful. Those are all great ones to, if yeah, nobody has to disclose anything if they don't feel comfortable with, and that's something that we should really know and stand firm with. Very few now, I'm sure more of my colleagues know now, but prior to this, I didn't share that I was neurodivergent, and but now I'm more open with it. So um,
And someone else also added, and I think this just applies to, once again, anybody, if we all normalize asking for assistance when we need it, then once again, people don't have to self-disclose. And whether you're neurodivergent or not, we all go through times when our personal life is hard, our professional life is hard. And if we just normalize asking for what we need and helping support, that goes a long way. So thanks for that.
wonderful. So, okay, so the next slide, somebody asked about management, like how to um, about the laws for disabilities, or and so these are, if you're in Colorado, these are some laws that, or one law that is that has been modified recently, and it's the House Bill 21 1110, and it's the Colorado law for persons with disabilities. I want everybody to know that there is federal laws that protect people that are neurodivergent or neurodiverse. Some of them, I'm sure we're all familiar with the AD. We have to comply with ADA in our libraries. And so, Americans with Disability Act is, I th- is one of them. The Rehabilitation Act of 1973 is another one, and some other ones: Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, Vietnam Era Veterans Readjustment Assistance Act, and Civil Service Reform Act. These are some acts that you can look into if you need to, and know that you are protected. Anybody have anything to say about that? Oh, you're muted, Christine.
Okay, like that's twice now.
Yeah.
So somebody shared a link in chat, askjan.org, and stands for Job Accommodation Network. So that's a great resource that I can also post along with the archive. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. AskJam.org, that's a great one. Perfect. And so, so the conclusion of this webinar, I hope everybody got a lot out of it, or some things out of it. I think as we still need to invest more research and money into studying neurodiversity and neurodivergent. I think that's the first step, is if we can, and do more research about many aspects of it, to better understand ourselves and better understand communities and all of it. There are many strengths that come with being neurodiverse, and some being tenacious, and I forgot what I wrote, and creative. Um, some ways to help neurodiverse staff is to have clear communication, as well as different modes of learning and work flexibility. Having minimal, no distractions, again, well, we talked about that. Learning and multi-module techniques, such as visual, auditorial, and hands-on. And we still need, remember to be loving and patient with yourself and others who are neurodiverse. And just in general, like somebody mentioned, we need to extend that love out there for everybody. So this is, now here's a Q&A section, if anybody has any questions.
And we do still have about 10 minutes. So if people want to unmute and ask questions, or if you have other thoughts or concepts or things that work for you that you would like to share, we can do that now. So we have one question. Are there any strategies you have for navigating stressful social expectations, like greeting people, walking up to patrons? It's a great question.
The strategies for that, I have to think about that for a second. Deep breathing. If I'm forced into a situation, I just breathe really quick. Or having something in my hand to fidget with, I think that helps me a lot. I have a tissue in my hand right now that I'm fidgeting with. Some other strategies. If you give me a couple more minutes, I'll answer that. Let me just think about that for a little bit. Does anybody have any other strategies that they do?
Yeah, we can throw it out to the larger groups. So somebody said, I usually try a radical empathy approach of thinking about when I need help. I often don't ask, so I go and ask them instead. That's great, kind of flipping the script. So yeah. And practice. Yeah. Any other responses to that question or any other questions that the attendees have today? And if by chance I missed one of them, we had such great conversation during the with the chat that I may possibly have missed a question. So if I haven't answered yours, let me know. Someone else says that we're researching this to have a library-wide staff training on neurodiversity and communication. Recently attended a neurodiversity fair to see about a speaker. Any other resources that we can check out?
Not off the top of my head, but if you give me a couple minutes, maybe I can think of something too. Or are you aware of anything, Christine?
I think so, I don't know, like I don't I would have to do maybe some digging to see, especially for Colorado, to see if there's any presenters or something. Somebody else is saying check out Casey Davis, the capital letter K, capital letter C, Davis. And somebody is saying that she loves that Enos is modeling, taking extra time to answer questions. So, and then in Tennessee, there is AAIN through Vanderbilt. There might be some place where you can get presenters, and I have had success with getting presenters from out of state. So that's something that if anybody else has thoughts about presenters, you can add them here. I can add them to the resource, and we can kind of build off that, but I'll do a little bit of digging as well. But I think some of like the books and things that were mentioned at the beginning of the session might also be a good place to start.
That's one thing that I'm starting to work on is a book list, and I didn't have it completed yet, so that's why I haven't said anything about it. But I'm trying to put together a book list of neurodivergent and neurodiversity.
And someone else says that Danny Donovan has an anti-planner. So Christine is now Googling. Unmasking Autism is an excellent read related to the topic. And here's another question. For someone who has not yet been diagnosed as neurodiverse, how best to ask for accommodations? So I don't know, like, do you have to have a diagnosis in order to ask management for accommodations? I don't know if that's something that you came across in your research, Enos.
I, in my personal experience, I don't think you have to have be evaluated to ask for accommodations. That's what I understood, at least here. But I don't know if that's changed. This was 2018 when I got evaluated, when I did a lot of digging for myself around this time. So I don't know if you have to show your, evaluated copy of whatever, what's going on, or if you could just ask for accommodations. I think it depends on the work culture and your work, the management and the state that you live into and the part of town.
Yeah, I did just a quick Google search and it looked like for ADA, you don't. Now, in terms of getting to the specific accommodation, there might need to be some documentation. Let's see, I'm looking for for official ones, you do have to have a doctor's note. Otherwise, you can just say stuff like, I work best when X, or is it okay if I try this? Or one doctor just has to say you have the disability and not the diagnosis. So it might be something to look in a little bit in a little bit more details, but according to the Job Accommodation Network, employers may request sufficient documentation when the disability and or need for accommodation is not known or obvious, but are not required to do so in order to provide accommodation. So I think, like with everything else in legalese, it can be vague, but sometimes it doesn't hurt to just ask. So that was a great question, though. We have about 5 minutes left. Any other thoughts or questions or things that you would like to share? You always have to have that awkward quiet time.
Right.
See if
I,
questions
I
come
was
in.
I was thinking about it earlier, and when I was doing my research, it said that it stated that 15 to 20% of the world are neurodiverse or neurodivergent. Neurodiverse, that's the terminology that was used. But I was thinking about it and I said, well, what about the cases that that don't have access to care, have not been evaluated, and just people, they don't have access to doctors either. What about in those situations? So I'm sure it's a lot bigger than it's even stated.
Yeah, I think somebody mentioned earlier in chat that it wasn't until their daughter was getting diagnosed or was learning about it somehow that it finally clicked in for the parent that, oh, I'm like that also. So,
Mhm.
and then somebody was asking a question, how can we get a copy of that book list that you're putting together?
Oh, wow. How would I be able to do that, Christine, after I put it
Um,
together?
if you after you put it together, if you send it to me, I can post it on the Libraries Learn website. So what's going to happen after today's session is I'm going to edit the archive. And get it posted to Libraries Learn along with the slides from today and some of the comments and things that you guys shared in chat for strategies and those kinds of things. The link that you get from me in the next day or so will link back to Libraries Learn where you can access all of those resources. So Enos, when you finish that book list, you just let me know and I'll post it there and people can kind of check back. Um, about that.
That
So
sounds
that was a
great.
great question.
Absolutely.
Um, and one last question. Are there things that you don't do at all or avoid at work because of being neurodivergent, like driving across the city to go to a meeting, not having to go to, excuse me, unstructured events, or do you just do it anyway and struggle? That is an excellent
Mhm.
question.
Right. In the past, I've done it anyway and struggled, but I think now I'm taking a different approach. And if I don't feel comfortable doing something, the last couple of positions that I've had a really supportive supervisor, and when I said I didn't feel comfortable doing something, I was heard. I was my voice was uh what is the word I'm looking for? It was not taken for granted. It was like I didn't have to do it because of because I didn't feel comfortable doing something that wasn't because of my neurodivergent one. But in the past, I would have to do something that I didn't want to do, or not didn't want to do, that I couldn't handle, or it was too much for me. So, but I think working at the library now has given me some more flexibility and more freedoms to do what I can, capably, what I can do. So I hope that answers the question.
Well, we just have a minute left, and I think that that is kind of a nice note to end on, right? Working in the library, trying new things, and learning kind of like where you do shine, I think is great. So once again, I want to thank everybody for attending today. We've had some really great communication on chat, and I will try to pull out the recommendations and resources that people were sharing. Somebody just posted that this was super validating, so thanks for having it. And I really want to thank Enos for reaching out to me to see about having this session and for agreeing to tackle her first webinar and sharing what she has learned from her own personal experience as well as her research. Once again, the archive will be available within a day or so, and everybody who registered will get an email. There will also be an anonymous survey that you can take, and then I will also let people know how you can get a certificate of attendance. So with that, it is now 1 o'clock. Thanks again, Enos, to sharing this great information, and I hope everybody has a really great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending.